How is everyone? My name is Alan Corbishley. Thank you all for joining us. It's an exciting time for us because we are bringing our production of Angel's Bone to Toronto on March 22 and 24. And I am the founding artistic director of Sound the Alarm Music Theatre, which is based in Vancouver. And we were one of the lead producers who helped make it its operatic premiere of this Pulitzer Prize winning opera, an incredible and stunning and evocative piece, Angel's Bone, as written by the incredible composer Du Yun, who's joining us here today. Hi, Du Yun from New York. Yeah, New York. Are you in New York? Yeah, great. And I'm also joined by co-producing companies Loose Tea Music Theater, as led by Elena Vio, and Array Music, as led by David Schatzko. And then we're also joined for a conversation with Arise Ministry, as led by Catherine McCloskey, and I think Bethany Gomez will be joining us for a discussion about the realities of human trafficking as it exists in Canada, and in particular in Toronto, as where this production will be. And that organization really is on the front line and street level, working in support of survivors and their families and the effects that that has. And we can talk and dive a little bit into that. And then we're also going to be talking with Taria Harris, who will be joining us. And she's based in Vancouver, but joins us for rehearsals, as she did in Vancouver, as a expert on human trafficking due to her personal connection as a survivor, and also as and now certified trauma therapist. So she actually helps our rehearsal process in making sure that we support the cast in somewhat difficult subject matter and in embodying characters, but then also just helping to be there as a consultant on power dynamics, on how the realities of human trafficking exists within the actual crime, and how people are exploited, how they're groomed, how they and also the sort of emotional effects in real time. So that's been quite an honor for us to be able to do, and to have her and other experts that we had in Vancouver as well. So we're going to talk about that. And but the real sort of like main purpose of today is to not only generate a free sort of like understanding of awareness event online for everyone, but also, if anyone is inclined to support the production with a donation, then I believe there's a donation link in the chat, and I'm not sure where else, but if you're willing to part with a little bit of money, or you want to support the show and you can't attend, then this is a great way. We're not looking for a ton of money. We are supported, of course, by the Canada Council for the Arts and for the Arts Council of Toronto and Ontario, I believe, as well as some private foundations. But we're actually just looking for a little bit more support so we can have just ensure that the process is supported by some of these support workers, that we can make sure that that process is kind of helped funded by, and that we're not asking for people to do things pro bono. So that's kind of where we would like our money to go. And so if you're willing to support, by all means, that would be great. David, is there anything else that I missed in there? Anyone? Elena, David, that you would like to add, or just...
That was great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Alan.
I don't think so.
Welcome.
Yeah, I don't think so. It is really great, great to be here. I'm really excited to get we're about to start truly rehearsing, so it'll be we're actually getting down to making art. starting tomorrow, right? So it's pretty
Ooh.
great. And I am really happy to be introducing one of my very oldest and closest musical and personal friends. I met Duyan, I think I was a sophomore at Oberlin, second year at Oberlin, and you were a year behind me, although we're the same age. And we met for the very first time playing in an improv quartet with another with the guitarist and the
You
cellist.
remember what it's called? It's called Pick Up Bitches.
Yeah. It was a delightful first experience with the and it just sort of it grew from there. She quickly became one of my sort of longest term and closest artistic collaborators. She's written, I've been really lucky enough to work with her. As I was a percussionist for like 10, 12 years, and so and then when I moved away to Toronto and kind of left that particular artistic space in the States, we didn't get to see each other as much. So it's been really lovely to be back playing on music again. And yeah, and this piece in particular, which I think was such a breakthrough piece for her, such a huge it was huge news, obviously, with the Pulitzer Prize, and it's really great to bring it to Canada. And I'm personally very excited to play one of your percussion parts. We didn't get to see each other as much. So yeah, Duyan, I wanted to ask about sort of the origins of this piece. And see, I remember when you started working on it because I had just left Toronto, I believe, and wasn't it for the project at the Mann Center originally? That was kind of the very sort of first inklings of this, and that was back in what, 2011, 2012, something like that.
Yeah. I'm not good with my own ears.
I know, neither am I. But so yeah, can you just talk a little bit about how that started and how it evolved into what it eventually became?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing me to this space. And it's so great to be able to see the work again. However, I feel like I never get tired of seeing different productions and interpretations, because once the piece is done, I'm more concerned about what other people's relationship and impact with the work. And I think that we're going to talk about that today as well. And I think that's why I want to do a piece like this. It was not because I wanted to just write an opera and just go, that I don't really like opera. I think that's the word is, it's like, oh my God, it's so lofty. And I remember that when you were working at the gallery in Soho and had this sound and image event, and I thought, oh, I could do this like a song cycle, but then it turned out to be my first opera, and then I was like, oh, that's kind of easy. So that after the premiere of the first opera, I met Royce Vavrick, the Canadian librettist, Royce Vavrick, in New York, and we really fell in love with each other's sensibility of storytelling, and we bonded over filmmakings, actually, and we just really wanted to do a work. But at that time, I was really I want to do a work, because when you are dedicating so many years of your life into a major work, I wanted this not to be just a piece that existed in academia or making some people happy or whatever, right? Like, I want to make sure that I think there is this urgent need to exist in this world. And at that time, I was reading this book about the middle person, and the sex traffickings, particularly in sex traffickings survivors. And what really great about that book at the time was not a social book. Like, it was actually all those like creative writings from those the people who went through that. So that to me was really eye-opening, that some of the entries was really this kind of like gray zone love-hate relationship with the middle person, and oftentimes they are disguised as a boyfriends or other possible routes. So I thought, like, that dynamic is really interesting, and I just brought this idea up to Royce, and he said, I just dreamt about having angels. So, and then before you know, it's angels. And obviously this narrative is a very clean narrative of what happened. What it would evolve with that, it was a very messy and not a clean version of how the piece was born, right? And I actually took 7 years from the beginning of that work to the world premiere production of this work. So, and it literally went through a major surgery, actually reshift of the focus in the middle of the piece, because we did this workshop and with the survivors, and I really adamant about I have to work with the real survivors, and through that I learned I have to shift the story tellings, actually from the angel's point of view to the middle person point of view, because I'm positioning myself at stake of the middle person rather than shifted to the angels, if that makes sense. So obviously we're going to talk about that more. I guess that's it. Yeah. Wait. But as I was also doing, then and then I realized that every region of the world has a different pattern and a different routes and different a motivation and different outcome of this trafficking, and we are also currently also having this kind of a trafficking crisis as well, with the uprising of the Ukraine war happening, and this, whatever, and also Super Bowl also is a big time when the trafficking thing happens. So right in the back door of the our country, So by our country, I mean North America. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things about the production itself. I mean, that we can talk about is this sort of, I think your perspective on it being, being who you are and kind of the globe-trotting world citizen that you are, is a very international one, right? And that seems like your sort of perspective on the issue is very international. And I think one of the things that happened in this production is, in a lot of ways, it's been made more local. And I think that's probably something we can talk about later. For just a second, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit. I mean, the topic, obviously, the issue is really the core of the piece, but also want to talk a little bit about the music. I mean, so how I'm wondering how you used music to address this story and these issues, because there's the piece runs the gamut of stylistically. Like, it's not just a notated concert music piece with stuff that sounds like an orchestra. There's just like your own musical life. You've got a wide range, and I'm wondering how you use that narratively.
Yeah. Well, I don't just listen to one type of music, and I think that if I go through my life, I listen to so many different type of music in a single day. That's the reality of my life. So if I were to write a work that I think it was trying to explore the truth or the reality of someone else's life, I wanted to reflection of a true reflection of what I could understand as the manifesto of someone's life could be, right? So which means that is not a singular narrative, not a singular language or style or things, just because opera has to sound this certain way. So I know I talk really down about opera. But it's also because sometimes, when we're talking about the kind of discontent, right? Like, I think that also makes us want to do things, wanted to kind of like a self-challenge and to kind of like see what our contribution to our time is, to a particular art form. In any case, I started from storytelling first. Basically, Royce and I come up with a story together. So it was definitely not, he finished the story libretto, and then I got the libretto and I work on the music. No, it was literally like, who are those people? Who are those angels? Why are they, and we had different idea of why they came down from the heaven. And I did not know that in in his world, like when angels going down to the heavenly, it was like a punishment. But in where I came from, you could just be a runaway children, and or like very envious of what the humankind world is. There's no that kind of like a repentance. In my psyche, right? Anyway, but I started with actually with Brick J, the song first, and that's like the first thing that I ever read. I wrote, and I also wrote for myself. So I sang it. By sang I mean like I screamed it. It was this moment where the girl angel was violated. And I just think that and then people talk about that moment a lot, especially from like music point of view. And I just think that for any victim going through that experience, I just cannot bring myself to write some soprano, you know, to it. Like I just feel like I have to have a guttural growl, and that's like the truth that I wanted to reflect. So maybe we should yeah. So and that's the first. And then as soon as we have the first thing, like you just everything just goes right. Like you follow the story, and I'm just hearing all those things, and then when there's shift, and then there's doo-wop. Sorry, because I think it's funny, and so for me, in my own head, it's very natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I have like academic terminology of how I'm, use the ontology of like things. No, I don't. It's just like it's how I feel it, and it's how I hear it. And I think that I read about someone else's writing about how I used it is much better than I could ever tell you.
Well, I think it does define this, help define the characters in the story, and also I think it serves to bring the audience closer in a lot of times, when when you're hearing something that is unexpected, and that you don't associate with.
Right. And for a work like this, right, it's not brainy. Do you know what I mean? Like it's I mean, you can analyze it, right? You absolutely can. And obviously in the work itself, like the music is actually a lot of thought go into the orchestration, things like, but it's not the point. Besides the point. The point of that is the story, and the urgency of that story drives the whole thing up. And that urgency, if you lose that urgency, I just don't see why the point of making the work like this.
So, I mean, I think if we move, I mean, talking of urgency, I think we can kind of move on to the next section and we'll pass it to Alan and Arise about the urgency of this. We are going to play Brick J, the song that Duyan mentioned a bit later, and as you know, and coming back to this particular production. But let's pass it over to Alan, I mean, and Arise, and talk about the urgency of the topic in Toronto, and maybe a little leading towards sort of what the things that we're trying to use this production to help.
Sure thing. Thank you, David. Yeah. Just so a little bit of context on on how this production kind of came to be. We actually started in like 2018, discussing the show, and it started by integrating a committee of local, being Vancouver, experts on who are working in the front lines and of the crime of human trafficking, and that included people who were within the legal system, the law enforcement, victim support services, former or current survivors, uh, active sex workers, um, people who were supporting youth in particular, or vulnerable or marginalized youth. And through that committee, we worked for 4 years. I mean, it wasn't meant to be that long, but you know, COVID was a thing. So through that, we actually dove into not only what the realities of human trafficking looks like, and some of the problems within the legal system that prevent it from being something that law enforcement can work towards preventing, but really it's in a reactive state in how it deals with the crime in Canada, but how prevalent it is, and also looking at those realities as to our interpretation of Duyan and Royce's work without changing the work itself, without changing the words, without changing the music, but how we kind of just re-envision what it came down to power dynamics for the most part. And then also one of our biggest changes was with the character of Mrs. XE, but we're going to get into that with Elena when we talk about the production. And point being is that these experts helped us inform those decisions. We're part of what was called a dramaturgical exploration, which means understanding how artistic choices are made and are consistent with maintains a consistency in narrative throughout. And so it was a very collaborative process, and then in fact was included in our rehearsals process to say, well, actually it wouldn't happen that way in real time. um, uh, and so it became a very, very informed and particular to the Canadian um, system, and what that life looks like. So it became a very Canadian production in that. So in moving this production to Toronto, we wanted to ensure that it was connected to the Toronto realities of human trafficking. And so knowing that Luce T had already worked with Arise in a previous production, of course, it was a natural fit. And so I just want to introduce you to Catherine McCloskey and Bethany Gomez, who help lead that large mission at Arise Ministry. And so, hello, just Catherine, Bethany, are you there? Do I see you?
Yep. Yes, you see me.
Yes, great. Hi. Thank you both for
Hello.
being here. Do you mind just kind of introducing yourselves and just kind of giving
Mhm.
a brief overview of what Arise is doing? Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Bethany. I'm the administrator and senior case manager at Arise. I've been with Arise for about the past 7 years. I started as a student placement and have slowly grown as Arise has grown as well. So Arise is a mission of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and we work with individuals who are involved in the sex trade. The majority of them identify as being trafficked or not wanting to do this work by choice. And we provide a variety of supports from case management, community meals, and art therapy, self-defense programs, and just different ways to be able to try to meet the needs of the individuals that we're supporting. And we're very honored and excited to get to be a part of this show, and we can't wait to see it along with everyone else, because this is obviously an issue that's very close to our hearts, and we really want to also get the message out there that this does happen. It happens in Canada and Toronto and the small town outside of the city and all across the country, and that no one is immune to this. It can happen to anyone, regardless of how much or how little you identify with the risk factors. Everyone is at risk, especially youth. They are the most vulnerable, and having an opportunity to get to share this message is really wonderful. So thank you for having us.
Of course. Catherine, do you want to speak to kind of the frontline street level work that you guys do weekly, I believe, right? Or is it even daily?
Weekly.
Weekly.
Because when we are engaged street level, it's between 11:30 at night and 3 in the morning. I had a recent conversation actually, because the question is the how and the when are very, very important. Our electronic outreach, which is connecting directly with online ads introduced in the midst of COVID, hugs the weekend, the Thursday and the Sunday night, specifically because we're looking for porous moments in people's lives. So one can imagine if there was something in our lives that we really, it's eroding us, it's destructive. In the context of trafficking, Thursday is the front of the weekend. So it's like, do I really have to do this again? And there can be that dread and that moment where maybe if somebody reached out, one could be pulled away, and then the Sunday would be on the other side of all of that. So the day that seems to be a very good day, speaking with our partners, speaking with the police, speaking with our ladies, to be actually on the street is at the front of the weekend. And that's why we hit downtown between 11 and 11:30, and we don't leave downtown before 2:30 in the morning. When it was pedestrian street level, and Bethany can attest to this, because we were walking within the strolls, so we would start as far east as River Street, and we would go at least as west as Yonge Street, pedestrian. That's an easy boundary to name. We'd be more than one team. We'd meet at a central location. We'd say, I'm going this way, you're going that way. We're going to meet back here where our cars are. And we could encounter somebody. So our 2:30 home time could be 3 a.m., depending on if we encounter someone in urgent need, if we encounter someone in conversation. Because we're driving, that's a little bit less typical because we're driving, walking, alternating now. But the point is we put ourselves where we believe the ladies are, and we come into their workplace, and we offer resources that we identify as being helpful for safety. And so these are tools of the trade that can be illness preventing, things that hand lotion, lip balms, things that keep skin less likely to break, super safety, that's just health. And then other things that communicate that a person matters. So there'll be some luxury items, there'll be some candy, there'll be, we have a pack of gum with our business card hidden in it, because of course we don't know whose eyes are going to be on our pretty bag. And at first glance, it has to look innocuous because we don't know. There was a mention of the middle person. So if there's a middle person that's a predator and they look into this bag, it has to be very subtle. From that, we develop relationships and we invite people into our other programs, which include case management and the art therapy and the community meals, and then of course the self-defense. When Arise began, when our founder began Arise, she had a very close relationship with people in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym. And the ladies were invited to bring themselves and their children to punch it out once a week and learn self-defense and to grapple and to be safer. And they actually had somebody who was so deep in self-defense and had his own history, I think it might be military, that he no longer felt pain. So if you can imagine someone who's had the kind of trauma that our ladies have had when they're very young, and then when they're older, being able to just punch or hit, just that's their body doing something. And here is this person who's saying, I don't feel it anyway, so let's learn this and let's really get into it. Some of that creative stuff has happened. What we're seeing now on the street, we're very painfully aware of the opiate crises.
Mm.
We're very aware of the impact of extremely dangerous substances on the street. And so sometimes what's asked of us is to caretake that. We bring other resources. People might be requesting, I need clothing, I need something to sleep with, I need this. And that's how we build trust. We can build trust with a Tim's card or a chocolate bar. Or I remember that when we're handing out these things, you have specific things that you want us to bring just for you. So we individualize.
Right.
And we look for ways that say that it matters.
So,
Post-COVID, there was a delay in getting back on the street simply because if I did not believe that I could offer consistency in my team, which means if I didn't have enough people to be very sure that we could be there every week, I wouldn't start the outreach process. So we intentionally waited so that we could be a consistent presence.
hmm.
A lot of our people, aren't in their teens anymore, but their entry point to being trafficked is some type of violation within the teen years. We
Mm.
also have people who I can think of one person who was 17 for 10 years. She was just put out there to meet the needs of customers as a 17-year-old for 10 years. And then what happens is the person inside and out is 17 for 10 years. So there's the chronological teen, and then there's the what's really happening inside this person. And you're going to hear somebody speak in the video named Jasmine, who actually has her own she's the executive director of Safe Hope Home, and she is a survivor. And when she's telling the story of what to look for and what to see, Jasmine is talking about Jasmine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to make a lot of sense in a few minutes. Deb Stanbury, who is our founder, and this is sort of a final thought, because you cannot take the teen or the child who's been exploited away from the adult who's being actively trafficked. So when Deb began, she was actually working with Evergreen, which works with young people up to the age of 25. And a lot of the work she did was with young people. She had one client who was a trafficker, but she had mostly clients who were being trafficked. And a lot of that was her inspiration to what can we do for young people? And then also acknowledging, and this is tough for us too, what happens when clients age out of the youth system. So Arise offers continuity and Arise offers continuation. So
Mm-hmm.
Deb brought that forward in her creation of Arise. And we really did begin as Deb's vision walking up and down the streets of Toronto in the middle of the night with extremely heavy backpacks.
Yeah, and
Like,
if you don't mind, this production in particular focuses more on the exploitation of youth in particular, and I know through some of our previous conversations that when you're doing a lot of the frontline work on the streets, you're not actually seeing the youth element of victims that are current victims, because they're kind of hidden away,
they're
right? Is that
hidden.
correct?
They're
Yeah. So,
hidden.
and then so the ones that the people and the individuals that you're working with or seeing actively, it's interesting to hear you talk about the tactics in which you use to build trust, which is actually kind of taking exactly the playbook from the exploiters and how they groom people and meeting them at a time where they're most vulnerable or where they feel they can generate trust through providing them with exciting things and with filling a void that they have already expressed as missing in their lives. And that seems to be what is generating that entry point. Is that a fair kind of
It
assessment?
is true. And the way that the narrative that we work from is we are now reclaiming that space.
That's right. Yeah.
We're reclaiming. And we are acknowledging that people who've been objectified and expect to be objectified need to be reminded of how it feels like to simply be cared for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an act of reclaiming. But you're exactly right that in this dialogue, 100%, you're coming in where the gaps are.
Yeah. So
When in our electronic, and you're right, Alan. So you cannot just put 14-year-olds on the street, because that will be policed so heavily and so fast. It's not going to work for the trafficker. The electronic outreach that we do allows us to connect with younger people because they're hidden too.
mm-hmm.
And with COVID, so much of the trafficking is inside, and that's the challenge, which makes this Angel's Bone opera so fantastically important, because we tend to forget what we cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to stimulate dialogue and awaken awareness and remind people of what to look for and what to be aware of, and what's happening and what we can't see.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to understand why we have really focused on the exploitation of youth, and for it not to get mixed in with maybe the misnomer or the misunderstanding of sex work, because when you're talking about youth, individuals who are under the age of consent, then this is inherently slavery. There is no consent involved in that process. So therefore you can't mistake it for a choice of sex work when when there's a sense of manipulation and removing that element.
Absolutely. And our client group is exactly who you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So let's actually why don't we just go ahead and watch this video. It is about 10 minutes long for those who are joining us. It is been created by Arise. And just really, just want to really quickly just say what we're about to watch. Maybe Bethany or...
Okay. Yeah, so this is a video that we made in partnership with Tamara Cherry, who was a journalist with CTV, and she did a lot of the early coverage around human trafficking in Toronto. And so for past May, for Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, we came together and did several interviews to kind of make a video focusing on the role that we can all play in preventing and stopping human trafficking. So that's what this video represents.
Great.
Yeah, unmet needs is just huge. For children and youth to be susceptible to falling into being exploited, it's easier to
I wonder if I can screen share, if it's better for me to play it from my computer.
And I now, it's basically my calling and mission to share my story, to expose these dark truths and try to bring further healing.
My name is Jasmine DePita. I am the Executive Director of Safe Hope Home, which is one of Canada's only long-term rehabilitative programs, which is also survivor-led for survivors of human trafficking.
It's often somebody that we know, that's close to us, that we think we can trust.
People ask me what I do, and they're like, oh, human trafficking, isn't that only like overseas? Or
like, one, I was trafficked by friends of my dad's, and he was one of the people that played a part in my exploitation.
I was at a dance competition with my daughter, and someone said, oh, there's human trafficking signs here. It must be really bad in this area.
Sometimes people think that it only happens overseas or it only happens in big cities.
And I had to educate them and let them know that actually it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Traffickers are very smart individuals. They know what they're doing and they can do it well.
What really alarmed me back in 2008 was just the lack of knowledge and understanding of what was really happening.
This person is so suave and so well thought out that they don't even realize what's happening until it's already too late.
What I learned was that as police officers, we weren't really doing our job.
I am Bethany Gomez, and I am a case manager and the administrator at Arise Ministry.
My name is Ty Trung. I'm currently a superintendent with York Regional Police. There really is an ugly side to life. And there are people out there that are preying on young, vulnerable children for sex.
It could be from any socioeconomic background, any education, immigrant or been here your entire life. Anyone could be victimized or exploited in this way.
When you get into the subculture of pimping and prostitution, you unravel things that are unspeakable, unimaginable to the public.
A lot of them don't make it out. A lot of them, are killed either by the buyer or by the pimp, or suicide, or overdose.
My sense of self-worth was equated to like my sexuality.
I would say everyone who's been through human trafficking gets a diagnosis or has symptoms of CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
At that point, I didn't care what happened to me, and I had enough self-hatred sort of and shame in that I was carrying.
I'd say 98% of my clients to date have substance abuse issues.
No matter what platform it is that we're engaging in, whether on the street or online or over the phone, it's often a very slow process because first they need to feel that trust in us, especially someone who's being exploited and taken advantage of and hurt in so many ways.
The average person leaving a sex trafficking situation, it takes them 7 attempts going in and out, in and out.
And that's like at least, it was probably more for me.
And they go back because their basic needs are not met.
We need to be more standardized, but have the ability to provide the proper wraparound services to those individuals.
You're just supposed to be like, okay, my trauma's gone, yay, like I'm going back to normal life.
There's also the logistical piece of not having IDs, not having a place to go to.
A lack of housing or safe housing is one of the biggest key components to falling back into it or falling victim to the traffickers.
And sometimes it's just thought of, well, just go to a shelter. But we know that the traffickers can also have access to the shelters.
Dental is a big thing.
Employment initiatives or employment training, childcare assistance, housing.
They're struggling because there are strong trauma bonds with their pimp or their trafficker.
It's also being willing to work together and share caseloads and resources in order to help a person get to what it is that they need.
Sometimes it's not the westernized counseling, but traditional healing and things in other ways. That's another one too, like decolonization.
We all have to be able to work together to support this individual.
The other thing is having such gap in employment for a resume, or having to explain to somebody with just a simple question like, what have you been doing for the last 3 years?
One agency is not ever going to get enough money to do all the work needed. And the only way that our clients are going to get all of the supports that they need is if we're building relationship with other organizations in the sector, but even outside of the sector, right? We need to get creative. We need to get outside of the box.
It starts with educating our children. And in order to educate our children, we need to have teachers, doctors, parents, everyone involved in knowing what this looks like and what the risk factors are.
Prevention is huge because, like I said, once that trafficking has happened, they're never getting away from that trauma.
It's not maybe comfortable to talk about or fun to talk about, especially with younger aged tweens, teens or whatever. But that awareness and education is everything to give them the power of recognizing what is potentially happening to them.
If it's not us educating these kids, they're going to learn the hard way through being trafficked.
We need to do better as a society to teach and show our children what healthy relationships look like.
A lot of people think that it's like a physical force.
This isn't just like in the Hollywood movies where a child's been kidnapped.
It's a very deep psychological.
Traffickers have found a way, especially through COVID, to enter your home without you even knowing through the use of technology and cell phones.
It's very easy, much easier to exploit children than it is adults.
The trafficker is listening to that person. You know, what are your needs? Where is society or your family or your friends or your partner missing a gap? What gap is missing? And they're gonna fill that gap.
We get intergenerational poverty and addiction and these kinds of things.
That trafficker is like looking at you in your eyes. They are listening to you. They are repeating what you say to them. They are making sure that you feel heard and seen and understood.
I think there is a lot of tremendous change happening, which is amazing, but we do still have so much further to go.
We need to, as teachers, as doctors, as nurses, notice these things.
It can also be you just submitting an anonymous tip because you have an inkling, or perhaps you're scared or unsure about going to the police directly.
It takes a village to raise a child. It really, truly does.
Having one parent who never gave up on me, who always reminded me of my worth, who would track me down. The power of my mom's love, like, it saved me in a way.
I think people in the community are overwhelmed when they hear about human trafficking, and they don't understand the role that they do play. But everyone plays a significant role.
Things can snowball in a positive way instead of negative, where it's like, now I have my own safe space. Now I have, like maybe a pet. Now I have, done some counseling and have more understanding. And when it snowballs like that, it's harder to go back.
This is amazing work and I love it every single day. But there are so many hard moments because what you're dealing with is seeing some of the worst of what humanity can offer.
Human trafficking looks like intimate partner violence. Human trafficking looks like child abuse. Human trafficking looks like torture.
We see somebody get punched in the head and, downtown at the Eaton Center. You need to report that, because maybe that gives that girl or that person the chance to get out of that situation. Just maybe you give them that like hope, right?
Human trafficking looks like men using their power and control to inflict harm, punishment, suffering, slavery on vulnerable children and young girls.
And to know that this person that you're sitting beside has just been through some of the most horrendous things, it can weigh so heavily.
A lot of these people believe that society doesn't care. They've been shown it in so many ways. They believe what the trafficker says, that they're worthless, that they're scum, that they're just, dirty prostitutes and nobody's going to care about. And if, as a society, we're continuing to turn a blind eye and look away, and it's not my problem and has nothing to do with me, so why should I butt in? Or, I've been raised not to get in people's business. Well, we're just reiterating that message to them. And that's how we're losing the kids. That's how we're losing these people. And that's not okay.
Yeah, it's just ugly.
Okay. Wow, it really gets you. It's especially the ending moments of just the realities and the emotional effects it has on not only your team but law enforcement, and yeah, it's a heavy burden to bear. So thank you for doing that work on behalf of our Canadian communities. And I think that's one of the biggest things is part of this awareness campaign, is that this crime is a Canadian problem. And that one of the biggest misnomers is that this happens in other parts of the world. And, we've all heard the stories about models going over to, other parts of the world and their passports being taken away from them and all these sort of things. Like, that exists, but that also exists here. And I don't think Canadians really like to look that very squarely in the face. but what was I going to say? I had a question while watching that, but I've forgotten it. Anyone have any specific questions, Elena or David? We're going to open it up for Q&A to the general public. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And then we're going to ask everyone these questions kind of in an open Q&A session that Elena is going to facilitate. Any questions to Catherine and Bethany before we just kind of talk about the production and how we've kind of moved into those realities into our show?
I mean, I think that was quite a powerful video. So I think people are just sitting with that right now, and maybe as we start talking about the production and showing how we're linking all these ideas, maybe people will be able to. I can tell you personally, I'm kind of sitting there like, oh, that was, that video was very affecting. So thank you for that. And yes, if anyone has any questions or any thoughts, please feel free to just post them in our chat and I will see them. But perhaps we can move into the production part. So
there was one thing that I remembered that I was going to say.
Oh,
I
okay.
heard a stat that if anyone went online as a youth, that a trafficker will have made contact with them within 48 hours. So at some point within, it's that fast that if you are entering certain avenues or online or entered some part of the internet that is new, that maybe is working towards this, you will be approached within 48 hours or have had contact. Is that accurate? Am I remembering that correct?
I would say it's accurate. Maybe it's a little slow. They have children can be thinking they're searching a favorite cartoon, and the traffickers pirate in under it. It's so subtle. There was something on CBC radio this morning talking about the legislature that the bill against for online safety, and how this was going to be talked about online, the government decision making, whether we want to do it online. And somebody was pointing out, we don't talk about making online safe online because we're basically in their playing field.
Mm-hmm.
But it is that fast, Alan, and it is that subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
think we put a link in the. Did we put a link in the YouTube chat just for people to look at some of the stats and resources, and people can kind of look at some of those Canadian stats of what, and that was actually based on 2023 Canadian Stats Canada, so it is very recent stats.
Yes, it's in the chat. Yes,
sorry,
it's there.
Carry on, Elena.
I actually just in gathering information to do this show and kind of researching how the online space works and how we see ads all the time for human trafficking that we don't realize are ads because they use certain language and whatnot. So there was a point that I was like, I think I just want to see how fast this is, or how if I just change my algorithm slightly, how I end up interacting with this information. And I actually had made a separate TikTok account and kind of like was maybe pulling on some of my like more childhood things, and I found very quickly that the content and the algorithm put me or who I was being myself, but I was kind of not being the Elena producer, director, etc. person. And I was surprised at how quickly certain types of content were coming to me and how that can be normalized for youth, and that like they're seeing these things and this is how you should act online and this is what your worth is, and how easily that then I could see how that trains them. And because their frontal cortex is not developed yet, and how that can make them feel like they need to be like that, and in order to be accepted in, it's just like this big downhill slope and easily grabbable for traffickers. And then I very quickly deleted that account because it got very scary very quickly. And that was an important thing just to like hook this into the production, when we were talking about design elements and how we wanted to show how trafficking happened now, that we actually are using that in the use of projections on stage, showing online content and ads, and how, just examples of how just having a phone and access to the internet, it is showing you things that are actually human traffic related, or it's people who are putting out feelers or interactions. And so we're actually using that in the production to make it have relevance in today, and remind people that it's not the old adage or image of a basement with chains and whatnot, that kind of imagery, that it actually is really heavily done online, and that is a very challenging area to police, or to even for parents to know what's going on their child's phone, and how they're being accessed by traffickers. So that is a large, that is a design component in our production, which I'm particularly proud of, showing the use of technology in the perpetuation of human trafficking. And I know that's something that was more of a challenge to have done, but I think it was really impactful when we had our production in Vancouver. So I'm really excited to dive back into that world as we get into our design and rehearsal elements. Yeah, I just wanted to connect that. That is one thing that was really important to me when we started doing this, was how can we show that online space?
And it was very interesting to even to understand the language that is used. Like even contact us for catering options, like that sort of language, which is like so innocuous. So like, who would ever think that that is, code for something? So yeah, I think some of that, how we've gone ahead and maybe reinterpreted maybe the original intention of what Du Yun had envisioned for the piece, or Royce, was in fact that Mr. and Mrs. XC have been doing this for a while. This is what we're wanting to do, was to show the varying stages of how does someone such as Mrs. XC get into a position of being an exploiter. And for our version, we wanted to build in layers to show the varying stages of grooming and what that looks like, and power dynamics. And so unique to our show, we are actually presenting Mrs. XC as a former victim who was brought into that system through Mr. XC. They developed, a relationship through that. And now at this point in time, when we enter this show, that Mrs. XC is kind of starting to take on, is understanding what her life looks like and has looked like. And there's an opportunity for her to now kind of enter this power position, and how that gets done. And then maybe some power switches and and kind of switching on who has the power and who doesn't in that relationship. But very pointedly so, as per the consultations with our group, was that that the real power and manipulation is coming from Mr. XE to represent really what is typical within the industry, which is very heavily, of course, male dominated as a perpetrator. But then also, how that gets manipulated emotionally, and how they can also play a victim at times, and etc. So we're really gonna like actually amp that up for this Toronto particular version.
And I think what we've done is really, because our consultation has been with, at first the Vancouver people and now with Toronto people, like we're making the production is really centered around what's happening in our local communities, where Duyan has created this piece that could be placed anywhere because it is a global issue. But what we're doing is contextualizing it within the cities that we are presenting it so that people can feel, can know that this is actually what's happening in their own backyards. And particularly, you know, in Vancouver, there were many conversations about murdered and missing Indigenous women, and Turia being with us through that process, so that we were addressing all aspects of what it means for it to be a Canadian issue, and for it to be, you know, within our city centers. And one of the things, just to bounce off what you were saying, Alan, about the different stages of trafficking, and what Arise was saying is that, you know, they start as children and then kind of stay in that state, because they're not allowed to grow up and to be, you know, normal humans in their growth. And so in showing these different,
fast.
they grow fast,
Yeah.
but they're also still stuck in that state.
Yeah.
And that the power dynamic that then Mrs. Xe finds, that she can now, you know, through becoming a perpetrator, or being somebody who can control a little bit more of what's happening to her, means that she then is putting, you know, she's controlling the people who have come up behind her in kind of this cycle and system. And we show how Mr. Xe and Mrs. Xe use emotional tactics, as Catherine and Bethany were talking about, you know, providing those things, those little crumbs of emotional needs or physical needs of a house, or, you know, whatnot, to keep them coming back, to keep them involved in the cycle and the situation. And that we show that through kind of the different stages of the victims that we have in our show.
Because it's a misnomer as well that people are chained and that they're like locked in rooms and in closets. That's not the case, right? People can go to the store, they can roam freely in the world. It's people are not like caged. That's not a thing, but it is, people are imprisoned through power and through misuse of identity, making sure that that's that they're in their power, that they don't have the option to go out and get a job or to leave. And then of course the threats on their family and et cetera. And also the legal system, you know, doesn't help with that process, which is a whole other topic, which we won't get into today.
Could I jump into?
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you a question.
This is like so amazing, you know, to hear, and thank you so much for bringing like the locality of the issues, and actually, I just want to point out that the original. I mean, the original intention was to left like very open so that this work can go places, because the issue is localized, right? So everywhere that we will, so the director and the producer could be addressing their local problems and becoming a work that is very resonant with whatever the places is. You know, it's not about the work. It's really funny to hear Ali was talking about Mrs. Xe being a survivor. We didn't really talk about that, but in my mind, I always thought, I always knew, no, I always made her as a mailed-in bride.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm someone who always have like a side B stories to every character, and because it has to make sense to me. And then I wanted to talk a little bit more about the middle person, and I wanted to actually, to me, it's not who is more evil. To me, it's not like, oh, is it Mrs. Xe more evil or Mrs. Xe is more evil, right? But I wanted to also address the problem is the middle person, and which means actually the complacency of the neighbors, and also including the audience ourselves, because we can easily be feeling like, oh, you know, I'm so good. This is someone else's, you know, things, and I would never ever imagine I could do this. But I'm just saying, like, if you're complacent and if you are being lured into this problem and no one is looking and you can profiting great profits, I don't know. I'm not so sure about myself. I hope I don't do it, but sometimes I ask myself hard questions, the psychologist questions, and I wanted to put myself at stake. Myself is the audience, right? So that myself, because I am not the survivor, so I wanted to put myself at stake. And I think to me, this is important to talk about that too. That, that for audience going into the work, like what's our relationship? Not to say that, the standing on the morale ground and to feel this like the sympathy, or to feel a greater than or less than, or so. And I feel like if we have that kind of compassion and to really put us to that kind of not a higher moral ground, then I think whatever we can do and address is a little bit deeper.
Hallelujah. Because it is something that we've actually thought about also, Elena and I, very deeply about, and how we've tried to actually integrate that. We're going to up the ante a little bit more in Toronto as well, and how we use the ensemble. We're going to use them differently in this production than we did in Vancouver.
Well,
And
slightly differently.
Slightly different, but really to showcase that society helps enable. It helps put these vulnerable people in these difficult positions, and that when they do see it, they don't really see it, or they see it and they don't really take action.
I think it's
or
the
they don't
culture.
want to see it, or they don't want to see it, or they're very complacent. Or
there are a whole village in I shouldn't say, but their whole village people know who was trafficked.
I know there's a book.
Completely complacent, completely. And when the police people coming in, they're all making up lies because they think, someone paid something, and this is also the culture of doing so.
I read that book as well, and I think it's like
I know people
they ship
who
they like bring they allow their children, or they sell their children to these people who then go down to the big city, and then
there's so many variations.
And so then the city is like, oh, they're making it big, and they keep that sort of like mystique up, and then but they actually know what's going on. But regardless, and then we also, Elena, do you want to also speak maybe about the audience?
I mean, so just to go off of what you were saying and tie it all in, so the ensemble are because the problem is that it's regular people who are buying and who are engaging in the illegal activity and the horrible activity of trafficking. It is police, it is teachers, it is people, your neighbors, it's regular people doing this. So our chorus or our ensemble is depicting society and these members of society who see it and don't do anything, and B, who are engaging with it, because it is regular people who we would actually maybe trust to not do those types of things, who are engaging with it. And that we, as the audience themselves, there's a moment where they end up a part of what's happening on stage. And we kind of make the audience sit with the understanding that they are complicit in this, in the perpetuation of this cycle. They are part of it. They're not removed from it. They are not, as Duyun said, better than. We are not better than. We are all a part of this system. And so what we do is make people kind of sit with the understanding that they are complicit and a part of it. And I have to say the piece is incredible, but it's also challenging. Like, we're going to challenge the people, the audience, just to sit with uncomfortable and challenging feelings, and how maybe, hopefully through being a part of this, journey, by being an audience member, you can think about your own actions or understanding of what human trafficking is. And what we want to do is action you towards change. And that's what this piece does really well. And I love, Alan, that we had so many conversations about how do we get the audience to feel these things, to be involved without kind of like, they're coming there to the show, so that's consent, but then they end up a part of it because they actually are a part of it in the real world outside of the theater.
That there's
Yeah.
a kind of like they enter into a bit of a system that they weren't knowingly entering, and then suddenly they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, so there was just one before we kind of like enter this to just the general questions by observers and people tuning in. I thought it was interesting when I described this piece, and I just want Duyun's and maybe David's perspective on this, is when I describe this piece as like what an audience comes to experience, and some of the feedback I've heard from colleagues and other people who have witnessed the show, that musically it just kind of like jumps around and is very interesting, but it kind of leaves you not feeling like you have a center. And I don't know if that's intentional, Duyun, or if that's insulting. I don't know. I would kind of wanted to know
And what is
where
centered,
you.
right?
I'm sorry.
When people go to the opera, they're like, "Oh, I want it to be centered." Like my question is, what is the center?
Right.
And we have to find like the leitmotif. Here's the leitmotif, here's the melody. Shit's gonna happen, and it's always happen in a surprising turn, and out of you can't prepare it.
So was that intentional in regards to the subject matter, or more to do with your standard artistic aesthetic?
No, it's not about my aesthetic. I might have so many aesthetics.
Well, I know.
But that's just how I engage with the story, I would say.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant by like, is that your aesthetic being so multifaceted
But it's not aesthetic. I wanted to make sure that it's not aesthetics. It's I'm exploring the reality, my side of truth. It's not about my aesthetics. I mean, my aesthetics, you know what my aesthetic would be? Things not going to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then, yeah.
It's a fascinating journey musically, because it really goes from Gregorian chant of sorts.
Because I do feel like when we talk about aesthetics, right? It's more like you can choose. It's more active. You choose to want to like this. You choose to want to put this clothes on. You choose to wear your hair down because I feel like it. Mm. But the reality, when I keep talking about the truth and things is sometimes it's not about how you like it. Mm-hmm. But you still have to encounter it, right? And then how you engage with that, and how you make yourself to go through that experiences and all that.
Well, when I was talking to my sister actually about that it's opera, and it's a piece that opera in and of itself is known for a genre of extreme emotions, of extreme situations, and heightened emotions, and this just pushes that even further. And so it really makes not only what's happening on stage in a really heightened emotion, it really generates and pushes the emotional sort of things on an audience as well. But they're going to feel things that they wouldn't typically feel when they go.
Also, when I first started, I really fought hard on using the kind of voice type for Girl Angel.
Yeah.
That not being a trained operatic singer, and sometimes it's easier to say now, and because then it's about who to cast and who to and often sometimes when we don't have an easy answer, it could be actually more expensive from the producing point of view, right? Because then you have to really dig deeper and going through rounds and all that. But as a creator, you have to make a case for it. You have to make a case why this is important, and I also have to work extra. Not extra hard, but and I said, I will work with anyone who maybe not even like read the music. So I literally worked with someone who did not read music, but I have to write a certain way as well. But and then I always feel like, what, I'm not afraid of doing that, because I always think that if Bjork can do crazy Bjork songs, and so many people can do a Bjork cover, I'm not afraid. I was like, once we have it done, it will be like pick it up so easily. And this is exactly what is happening, especially to this work. I really feel that every time I see Girl Angel, I'm just like bombarded with like this raw emotion. It's a beautiful rendition, and as a matter of fact, that when I saw Rihanna and it's doing in Vancouver, like it was just so heartbreakingly wrenching and beautiful, and all that words cannot say it.
And I don't think, that we're gonna play Brick J, actually, I think right now. And what I love about it is that I would not want to see this piece beautifully sung by a soprano in the traditional kind of operatic way, because what she's experiencing, what her character is going through is not, it's not appropriate, like, for that character, for what she's going through, to sing it in this beautiful, Puccini kind of way. And that I can't imagine it being anything different than what you have, because it's so affecting. And that's supposed to be the reason why we go see theater, is to be affected by something and to have it. I just love the way that you've reflected it. So we've talked about it, I think, about 4 times now. So let's play the piece. So this is from our Vancouver production.
Day likes it rough, grabs the skeleton of my empty wings, breaks off a piece, laps at the marrow, clutches the scrap, slurping in circles. A sexual Brick J can't get enough, mounts me, holding me by my empty wings, sucks every drop of my innermost marrow, moans as he rolls, as my tissue on his tongue, a kind of oh, he can't get enough, he likes it all, he can't get enough, he likes it rough. I'm wet. He's devouring. I'm wet. He's devouring. I'm wet. He's devouring. He drops the cleaned out bones spent. I whisper back to the house, hoping Mr. XE has some extra strong adhesive to put me back together. I scavenge the hallway closet. Rust removers, feather dusters, bleaches, peach scented dish soap. Dish soap! No! The numb of bone sits on the counter till the horror store opens at 8 a.m. It takes 4 applications to mend me, to The world's, the world's, the world's judgment. He's devouring my way. He's devouring.
Okay. That was actually Eliza Brigg, who actually lives in LA. We had double cast of Girl Angel in Vancouver. The Toronto version actually is going to be with Winona Miles, who's actually from Vancouver and Canadian. Does have a personal connection to the situation of that we're dealing with, and the and that's also the person that Duyun was talking about earlier in regards to performance. So we're honored to have work with both of them, but to keep it more on the Canadian side, we're also just welcome to have Winona back on in Toronto with us. Yeah, it's a pretty hard hitting piece.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat, but we have already covered quite a significant amount of content and kind of gone a little bit over time-wise what we thought we were going to. So kind of a last call if anyone had any questions. But otherwise, we've had an incredible discussion here today with our talking musically about the piece, with our partners Arise, and discussing the actual, wow, I just got tongue-tied. The issues at hand of human trafficking, and Gian, it's been great to kind of hear some more where that came, the genesis of the piece and how that developed for you. I didn't realize it was 7 years of development, but I am not surprised. And then how we've tied that all into what we're doing in this production in Toronto, and of course hearing a bit of Brick J. So that's been a quite a big amount of things that we've covered here. I don't see any questions, so unless Alan, David, Gian, any final, or Catherine, and I think Bethany is still with us, any final thoughts or comments?
I just want to say thank you so much for not only doing the piece, but taking a great care and on the topic. And thank you to Arise. And it's so incredibly moving to hear what Catherine was saying, and just it sometimes just feels like goosebumps and a teary. It really it means a lot to me, and it just so nice to hear that that we're in this together and to fight over like as much as we can with this cause.
Thanks, Gian. Catherine, did I see that you wanted to jump on?
I was also going to express gratitude for what Angel's Bone is offering, what all of you are doing, and to be able to speak into what is such a painfully difficult situation. We are, like, Arise is a 24/7 agency. And just from that one song, I can really feel the size of what's going to be said by your production, and I'm grateful for that.
We're grateful for all the work that you do, and hopefully, there's often not that often artists, it's hard to do so. It's hard to find sometimes. Sorry, there's yelling children in the background. Sometimes it's hard for us to find things that that maybe can make a little bit of a difference on the ground. And I think this piece is something that does offer that in a small way, and hopefully something. I think our biggest hope would that be something comes from this that makes your work easier. And so thank you for all that you do.
And I just wanted to say that much like anything, big shows like this take a village, and we are 3 co-producing companies with and Turning Point Ensemble as well being a performance partner. So we could not have done this piece in such an impactful way without all of our manpower and person power behind the 3 companies that are engaging with this, because we've all taken on different aspects of producing so that we could do it intentionally and with as much integrity as possible. We are indie companies, so that's always stretching us a bit, but it has been. I'm so glad that we've had this chat just before we start rehearsals tomorrow, in fact, and all of the intention and all of the very specific work that we've all been doing to make sure that we're reflecting the current situation, that all the regular things of producing are happening. And I just want to mention, in case anyone here has the wherewithal or the ability, this is also a bit of a fundraiser. So if you're able to support our work, please feel free to do so. I can put the link in the chat, or maybe Array can do that again. Just put the link in the chat for a link to Canada Helps and our fundraiser that's going on for this piece, because it does take so much work and so much effort so that we can do these types of things, because art should change people and move people towards actionable things within our communities and societies. So I just want to say a big thank you to Arise, my co-producers David and Alan, and to Doyun for your time and for this incredible work for us to dig into and hopefully make change within our communities.
Thank you. I would also just extend everything that is always said. I don't need to add to any of that. The only thing I would add is that if you feel like financially that's not something you're wanting to do, but you really want to support kind of the initiative, by all means share it, kind of talk to your friends about it, come to the show. If you're in the area, just buy a ticket. We do have pay what you want tickets, which range from $8 up until the standard prices, which include adult at, not adult, premium seats at $60 and then general seats at $45. So kind of there's an entry point for pretty much everyone on a financial standpoint. So
we hope to see you.
Hope to see you. And it's
Please
all
come out.
angelsbone.ca, where kind of all that information and all of our organizations kind of all go into one, and you can find tickets there. And they are selling pretty well at the moment. So yeah, we hope to see you. Okay. Thank you,
Amazing.
Array, for hosting this, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
all.
Bye.